rules we have to go over or anything today? It's okay to say no? Okay. But I do, is Gordon the only elected person on so far? Okay. Okay, great, all righty. Well, welcome, everyone. Just a few logistics before we get started. The bathrooms are just down the hall and on your right if you're a gentleman, on the left if you're a lady, and the gender neutral is on the right as well. For the folks on Zoom, during the Q&A session, we're not using the chat in tonight's meeting, so that we don't have a separate Zoom meeting going on and a separate room meeting going on. But I could use your help to see the raised hand. So that'll be great. We will rely on the raised hand. So, and I'm so pleased to, well, I'm just so excited you're here. I've been excited about this for days. Tanya will tell you, I've been going to her office. So, but I'm really pleased that we're sitting intimately versus you all sitting in the back row. That would have been a little lonely. Would you like to introduce yourselves to one another?
Some quick adjustments.
I would like that. Okay, all righty. Well, I'll start. I'm Catherine Harrington. I'm your elected chair of the Washington County Board of Commissioners, and I'm here with my four district, well, at least district commissioners, Commissioner Jerry Willey, Commissioner Pam Treese, Commissioner Roy Rogers. Can you give us a wave? Wonderful. And do we have Commissioner Fye online? Nope. Okay, great. We have Ms. Tanya Angie, our budget officer and county administrator extraordinary, our very brave chief financial officer who joined us in June of last year. So he has had the privilege of honor and a wicked lot of hard work to work all across the county and put together his first Washington County proposed budget. So we're really happy to have him here. Ashley, would you mind starting?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Ashley Hartmeyer Prigg. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Beaverton City Council president.
Hi, everyone. Felicita Monteblanco, she, her pronouns. I was about to do my work intro. I am the HPRD board chair.
I'm Tim Rippey of Forest Grove City Council.
James Fage of North Plains City Council.
Wonderful.
Steve Calloway, City of Hillsborough.
Maureen Wolf, City of Tigard.
Heidi Lube, City of Tigard Mayor.
Valerie Pratt, Tualatin City Council President.
Alfredo Moreno, he, him, Tualatin Hills Park and Rec, Board Director.
Carl Fisher, Commissioner, Tualatin Valley Water District, he, him pronouns.
Hi, Pat Garrett, he, his, Washington County Sheriff.
Julie McLeod, County Administrative Office.
Hey, all, Lisa Tattersall, Washington County Cooperative Library Services Manager, she, her.
Good evening, everyone. Marnie Kyle. I'm one of the assistant county administrators, and I use she, her pronouns.
Good evening. My name is David Martinez. I'm also an assistant county administrator, and I use he, him, and él pronouns.
And on Zoom, Gordon, would you like to say hello? Gordon Hovey's board member for the Tualatin Valley Fire District. Oh, we have a few of you. Oh, look at
Yes.
that.
Thank you, Catherine, for that, and Gordon Hubbies with Walton Valley Fire and Rescue Fire Director. Thank you.
Frank, go ahead. Frank?
Good evening, Frank Bumick, Mayor of Tualatin.
Mayor Beatty, hello. Oops, you're still on mute.
Hello, Mayor Beatty, the very lucky mayor of Beaverton, and this is our 1-month-old Kyra. You're having dinner with us tonight. Thank you for making the Zoom option available.
Our second vice mayor, that's wonderful. And Commissioner. Hi, Ayla.
We do local government as a family affair around here, so nothing more important than our county budget.
That's great. And we introduced Commissioner Roy Rogers a little earlier as well. Do we have any other electeds who might be on? Okay, great. Well, I'm just so excited that you all are here. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Chair Harrington. Kristen Sasko is also on from Tualatin.
Okay. Kristen, would you like to say hello?
Good evening, everyone. Kristen Sacco, City of Tualatin City Councilor.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. So hopefully everyone who is on Zoom has had the opportunity to pull down the packet for the meeting so that you have the slides in case anything goes wonky with the display and your bandwidth. So here I am, the change maker you've all gotten to know and see in action the last several years. Well, tonight is a big night for us. I'm so excited, as once again, we're doing something new. We've been on this theme for a while. Your county commission knows that we share common constituencies. The last 3 years has driven to the forefront our interconnectedness as local governments, together in service to community. Here at your local county government, we've welcomed new executive management, new department management, and new employees all across our workforce, which has gifted us the opportunity of discovery to question, what are we doing? How are we doing it? How is it funded? Knowing that we've had revenue restrictions for multiple budget years and having the benefit of further insight on community needs and having capacity limitations to move beyond, we find ourselves this year with a much clearer picture, though one that is more painful than before to address. As such, I championed us having this partner experience tonight, a first ever meeting of all local electeds for you to hear directly about our proposed county budget, and for us to continue the conversation, problem solving to meet community needs. This is not our last conversation, though for some of you I'm meeting for the first time. Thank you. It is your first opportunity to ask questions about this proposed county budget. And perhaps you've heard some about it already from your city or service district managers with Ms. Angie from last Friday. A few asks of you. We have a feedback problem. Thank you. So a few asks of you. We will have a Q&A session tonight. Please note your questions during the course of the presentation and hold those questions, no interruptions, until the Q&A session. She's been through this a few times and it just works best that way. So noting the slide with your question may help. We have some pens and pads of paper if you want it, and hard copies of the presentation too. You will have questions during the course of this presentation and our session tonight. Ones that the presentation doesn't fully address. Remember, our proposed budget was only published 6 days ago. And all of us as commissioners are digging in. And so that means we're digging into the Washington County budget and the Clean Water Services budget. So as in baseball, it's the yearly doubleheader that we find ourselves with. So we may not be able to answer all of your questions tonight, and it's probably we won't. But we want to hear your questions nonetheless, and we will note them and include them in the follow-up. So I don't know how many more ways I can say. Questions are welcome, and we're all learning together. So as I shared in the meeting reminder email, we share constituents. We work through some of the same societal. Hopefully I don't have to start over. You might be thinking, okay.
It's kind of nice to say I'm not on Zoom right now.
Okay. Whew.
Can we bring these up closer?
No, it's not that. It's I don't know how to turn this off.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Except I zapped you. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay. Can we go? This didn't happen earlier when we tested it.
Not in practice. Never happens in practice.
We're trying the wireless mic now. So far, so good, because I'm going to talk really fast. Thank you again for sharing a couple hours of your evening with us. We're really trying to make it worth your while. So as I shared in the meeting reminder email, we share constituents, and we work through some of the same societal issues in some of the very same areas that you do your work in. You might be thinking about housing, whether it's affordable housing, homelessness, housing development, library support, public safety and justice, and boy, have I learned there's a lot there. Patrols, community corrections, juvenile justice, district attorney, courts, community corrections, holy smokes. Us, we also do a little bit of economic development, and you do a lot more. We also have an array of county-wide services that we value too. This budget year has taught me a lot more about property assessments, taxation, collection, distribution, a lot more about elections, mental health services, and much more. But what I know very clearly is we each work towards a positive, thriving Washington County community. And it's in that spirit of togetherness that I am pleased to turn this mic over to Tanya Angie, our extraordinary county administrator and budget officer.
Maybe sharing is caring. I don't sharing the mic. So thank you for being here this evening. And I have been meeting over this last year with your city managers and special district managers. We meet on a monthly basis, and then also we connect off times because I've started with the county in August of 2020. So yes, one of those that moved during the pandemic, and have really enjoyed the relationship with your managers in really this interconnected, amazing community of Washington County. And that also extends to our amazing staff. As many of your organizations are seeing increasing retirements, challenges in hiring, speed of hiring, we're also seeing that. And I want to just take a moment to recognize that while I serve as the budget officer, the preparation of this budget would not have been possible without our One Washington County approach. And what that means is departments really coming forward in a solution-based way of how can we continue to meet need and still meet our revenue and expenditure needs. During budget time, one of the phrases I like to use is 2 + 2 has to equal 4. So we have to get to that equal and that balanced budget, because as the budget officer, that is one of my core responsibilities, is to provide to the budget committee proposed balanced budget. And I forgot I'm in charge of the slide, so I'll move on to next slide. So I'll start with a bit of background. And so this proposed budget is coming at a time that we are seeing growing and evolving needs. We're at the point of time of post-pandemic. We've had a surge of one-time capabilities that have allowed us to serve our community and the increasing need that we've seen through COVID pandemic. And yet we've had this ongoing strain on services and resources. We've been able, through these one-time funds and other sources of funds, to address inequities, and yet equities remain within our systems. I submit the proposed budget with hope for the future in our service delivery, and yet there is still remains risk and concern with available revenues to meet that growing need. And so let me lean into hope. Hope is leaning into the board-led strategic planning process that we are currently drafting an RFP to secure consulting resources for. This will be a community-focused strategic planning process. Of context, the county has not went through an extensive strategic planning process for 30 years. Our community's changed and evolved, so it's time to really bring this to the forefront. And I do want to note this is a priority that the board had established in 2019, but you know, COVID happened, right? So we all delayed many priorities. We are centering equity within this process and currently working with our advisory council on racial equity to draft the RFP. Our inputs into the process will include service level assessment. What services does the county deliver at what level? So that we can look at what are some of the gaps and community need. Looking at capital spending or capital needs, because as we look at operating services, our operating budgets, we also need to be mindful of the capital needs that are associated with that. Public input. We need the community involvement. We will need your involvement through this important process. And then also internally, we have an internal initiative called Design the Future, where we're modernizing and evolving our practice within our internal departments, such as finance. We're working through a budget redesign process, HR, upgrading our 23-year-old enterprise resource planning system, and I could go on. But it's really evolving our work to meet the future needs of this community. I will not walk through nor expect reading of the text on the screen. We included this document just because it's a good resource. This is produced by the Association of Counties, and it really lays out functional role that counties play. And when I've shared this with cities, it helps city managers describe some of the difference between cities and counties or special districts. So counties have a unique role because there are state-provided services, and then there's state-county shared services that counties actually fund a portion of that service level, and then there's county-provided services, which are general fund or special funds or called restricted funds need to pay for. Another chart that's included in your packet, which is a busy chart, once again, don't strain your eyes. This just lays out our organizational chart, including highlighting our elected officials, appointed officials, and then our functional areas. And really, to me, what this describes is the wide variety of services the county provides. And I will pass the mic over to Greg to talk about the funds.
In the back of your handout, so if any of you are challenged by it. You're very welcome.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Munn. I'm new to the county. I start, as Chair Harrington said, I started June 1st of last year, and that night was the budget committee approval of the 23 budget. So I jumped into it right away, had no idea what was going on, and I was glad I didn't get called on. So I came here from Deschutes County. I was the elected treasurer and the CFO there. And so it's a real similar role for me, although you know, there's 36 counties in the state, and when you've seen one county in the state, you've seen one county in the state. So this is a new adventure for me. I want to I want to give you just some big picture numbers. We're not going to go into a whole lot of detail on the county budget. Just a few little factoids for you to think about and remember. But our overall proposed budget moving into the next year is $1.7 billion. That's up about 4% from the current year budget of $1.6 billion, so a slight increase. And these graphics that you see up here are interesting at least to get an idea of how the money is spent. They don't give you an idea about how the money has been spent as it's changed over years, but it does give you a big picture. So on the left-hand side, that is just a breakdown of our $1.7 billion based on functions. So what the services are that we provide. And you can see that over half are services. Those are the services that we provide to the community. The big ones, of course, are housing, health, and human services down there at the lower quadrant. And up above that, public safety and justice is another one of the big ones. About 20%, about a fifth of the budget is spent on capital. Most of that is in transportation and facilities work, and some in technology as well. And then the upper 20% on the left-hand side is non-operating, and that is essentially our contingency. Those are the funds that we, as most of you probably know, we put in our budget. It's appropriated in our budget, but it's not appropriated to a specific line item in the budget. And the balance of that item, the non-operating, is our transfers out, our property tax transfers out for our MISTIP and library programs. On the right-hand side are the same numbers, same 1.7 billion, but it's broken out in the type of expenditures. So you can see that about half of our budget is spent on people and our materials and services. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Next slide, clicker. Okay. So that Tanya and I are pretty good at this. We've gotten to the point where we just kind of look at each other and we can kind of read each other back and forth, but we'll get back to it. We just get the rust off here. Okay, so this graph is just the revenue side of the equation. It's still 1.7 billion. Where does the money come from to pay for the programs? And of the 1.7 billion, about 1.2 is new revenue each year. The other 500,000 or so is carry forward from the 500 million, I should say, is carry forward funds. As you can imagine, we have probably 90 funds in the county, and each one might have a little bit of carry forward for whatever specific function that we're providing. Those are the dollars that get carried forward from the prior year. And we'll go right to the next one. So this is where it gets a little bit interesting and helps drill down on some more specifics of our budget. So this graph here this is the new revenue we get each year. This is the $1.2 billion. And what's interesting about this is that about 20% of it is unrestricted revenue and 80% is restricted revenue. So the 80% that's restricted is restricted by the source that the revenue comes from. And you can think of grants, contracts. The county or any organization is going to get a certain amount of money to do a specific service. The unrestricted component is mostly our property taxes. So these are general revenue dollars that the county uses to pay for some of our core services. Okay, a little bit more information on unrestricted and restricted. You can see there on the left-hand side, generally it's property taxes. It funds the list of services there, law and justice, elections, assessment, public health, and so forth. It equates to about $250 million of that $1.7 billion budget. $250 million is unrestricted. Of that amount, over 50% is either dedicated or committed to other purposes. Most of that is our arrangement with MISTIP, the transportation funding, and our library system. And a component of that is also limited in terms of SIP revenue that we receive that is limited in terms of contract. So when you boil the revenue down, it really becomes a much smaller component and helps us understand how this all works within the $1.7 billion budget. Okay, next slide.
So now we'll talk through financial challenges. So we won't spend time on defining the terms. Many of these terms you are familiar with. However, we will be referring to general fund, special fund, or as Greg had indicated, restricted fund. Those can be, labels can be interchangeable. Capital expenditures, and then our strategic investment program. And Greg will dive into a definition of what the strategic investment program or SIP in a future slide. So Greg will briefly talk about what caused our imbalance in the general fund. So going back to that unrestricted, the general fund it being unrestricted, that will be the primary focus of what we're going to talk about this evening. The page numbers that you see on the screen are page numbers to reference back to the budget document if you want to look at the budget document and find more of this information.
Okay, so one of our challenges is that our expenditures are growing faster than our revenue. Over the last 5 years, they've grown at an average of about 7.7% a year versus our revenue growth of 5.8% a year. And I have a slide in a couple of slides that'll show that a little bit better. We currently have an over-reliance on one-time funds. Also, I have a slide to share on that, but I'm basically referring to our SIP dollars. And as most of you probably are dealing with as well, health insurance and the retirement system costs are growing much faster than revenue. That's been a challenge for the last 20 years or so. So we're dealing with that as well. We also have unfunded state mandates, like many of you do. As an example, the new Paid Leave of Oregon program, unfunded, we had to include about $450,000 of new spend in the FY24 budget to accommodate the administration of that program. There's no revenue associated with that. We just have to spend that money to manage the program. And Ms. Angie mentioned earlier key technical systems and facilities that are not at or nearing the end of their useful life. The one that's probably we talk about most is our financial and HR system. It's our core accounting system, and it's called an ERP system, but that's a $7 to $9 million cost that we're having to fund, and it's 23 years old. So it's well time to upgrade that program. So that's another issue that we're dealing with. So basically the bottom line is, as we went into this budget, we discovered or forecasted that we had about a $25 million gap between our revenue and expenditures moving into FY24. That equates to about 7% of the budget. And additionally, just one other bullet I'd bring up here is that generally speaking, we're experiencing the results of Measure 50 revenue constraints that have slowly been compressing our ability to fund expenses in the long run. And this is a common conversation that many of us in local government have been talking about over the last 15 years. It's just a matter of time when those two lines cross.
Greg knows I want to take the mic on this graph. This is my favorite graph. And I'll explain why. I actually like lots of graphs because I think graphs are a way to tell a story. So the three bars are Washington County, Clackamas County, and Multnomah County. Measure 50 put in place the permanent property tax rate. That's what you see in the yellow. I get many questions from community members. Multnomah County delivers this service, or Clackamas why can't Washington County? Well, the yellow portion is our permanent tax rate. So you can see the difference in that permanent rate between the counties. I would also note that we are growing at a faster pace than the other counties as well. Of the $2.25 of the permanent rate, 96 cents is MISTEP and WCCLS. So that leaves about $1.25 for the other general fund type services. Correct. With the exception of local option levies. And so the blue is the local option levy portion for each county, and then the green is the bonded. So Chair, thank you for adding that piece. So Greg, if you can talk a bit about SIP and general fund projection.
So this is one of the graphics we've been sharing over the last several months to help educate folks on not only our general fund expenditure and revenue difference, but also the gap between the two and how that ends up being forecasted into the future. So This is a 10-year look, the FY17 through FY22, those are actuals. The red line is our expenditures and the green line is our ongoing regular revenue, our property tax revenue, the revenue that normally funds operations in the general fund. You can see there that there's not only a gap, but there's a growth differential. If you extrapolate that out over the next 5 years into the future at the same growth rates, you can see that that gap widens. In FY17, we used about $19 million of SIP revenue to fund that gap. Since FY17 into FY22, that has grown to $43 million. And if you project that out a few years, out 5 years, that gap ends up being $90 million. I will say a sidebar, this is one of our areas that we're working on. We're not there yet, but we're reducing our dependency on SIP in the FY24 budget down to $32 million. So we're starting to work at that as well. But this is probably the best graphic that talks about the general fund and our financial challenges over a 10-year period.
So the Board of Commissioners had given guidance into the work of the proposed budget this year. I'm not going to spend time walking through the board's budget principles and priorities. I almost got my piece twisted up, but they are in your packet for reference. This had helped us make decisions that went into the proposed budget. This will also be used as the board goes into initial goal priority setting process this summer, which will be a good step into a full county-wide strategic plan. So let's talk about balancing the proposed budget, because it is my responsibility as a budget officer to present a proposed balanced budget. So on this slide is a high level of general fund reductions. This isn't a detail list, and this is listed on page 9 and 10 of the budget message within the proposed budget. There is no cost of living increase for all executive level staff, so that's our department directors and above, including me. We did limit staff increases to 3.5% for non-represented staff. And we're looking at a 5% reduction in health insurance cost over this next year. And so that is a cost containment strategy. So we'll be needing to look at our health insurance negotiations and how to achieve that 5% reduction this year when those contracts are up for renewal. We're using a data-driven vacancy management strategy, and looking at the past 3 years, we're confident we can achieve $4 million in vacancy savings. Part of that will include looking at every position that is vacant and determining if those are essential positions for us to fill as we move forward. Because one of the things that I am so incredibly proud of all of our departments, we were able to balance this budget without layoffs or furloughs. And so being proactive and looking at our FTE and determining the need to fill in our service level needs to be an ongoing exercise as we look forward in the next few years. So with that, we did eliminate 22 vacant positions within the general fund. In addition, reduced the general transfers, general fund transfers to MISTIP and WCCLS by 7%. I do want to add every department within the county that receives property tax funds were required to submit a 4%, 7%, and 10% budget reduction. Part of the strategy in this, and Greg will talk more about this, is also having a long-term view at this, and across the board, 7.1% cut could be dramatic to different service levels because each program, each area is not the same. Some are more personnel heavy and some have more M&S costs. This is also our second year of implementation of our budget equity tool, and I do just want to call out and recognize Latricia Tillman. And Latricia, if you can just wave in the back of the room. Latricia is the county's first Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, and this is our second year, and her team developed the tool last year. We learned some through this year. And this year, departments had submitted their 4%, 7%, and 10% reductions and also applied the equity tool to each of those reduction scenarios. Within the budget message, there is reference to the tool on page 10, and page 33 includes a further summary of the budget equity tool. And I will say, while this is a cut budget, that is a I just want to say I'm proud of the work departments have done, because we are continuing to make equity investments, new programs, and initiatives to meet our diverse community. So let's touch base and go a bit beyond the general fund. As Greg had mentioned, we have restricted, unrestricted funds. So we spent some time on the unrestricted funds, but we do have several other service areas within the restricted area. So houselessness and home affordability, we are on target, which is very exciting, for 450 year-round shelter beds. And this is due to the Supportive Housing Services funds, and also the governor's executive order on houselessness is also helping support the already coordinated system that we are working towards with your cities and special districts. Protecting public health, we did surge our capacity within public health through CARES dollars and ARPA, and we are continuing to serve COVID needs through the state mandated requirements using ARPA funds. And some of those areas are COVID investigation, reporting, outbreak activities, and we are pursuing additional state resources through public health modernization dollars. And hopeful that the state budget will actually add more dollars to that need, because we have a stellar public health team and can really put those dollars to work. Economic development, we've been using our local economic development funds and ARPA funds to focus on career development, workforce training, and capacity development with our organizations, partner organizations. Matt Craigie, which is the county's first economic development manager, has been with the county for about 2 years, and he really convenes also your city economic development manager, so that we're all coming to the table together in a way that is coordinated for economic health for the entire county. Community development, evictions continue to happen, don't they? And so focusing dollars on emergency rent assistance through 2024 using our federal emergency solutions grant, which we're matching with supportive housing services dollars. So this is part of the strategy to look at how do we reduce the cliff of the federal dollars that we saw infused throughout Washington County with eviction assistance, and still at the same time really wanting to build up permanent housing solutions within the community. We are planning to award $5.2 million for shelter and nonprofit capacity building, something that we've learned and have received significant community CBO feedback on is relative to capacity building. And as we've built out, whether it's public health response or the supportive housing services, some of our CBOs may not have contract management, financial management capacity, or other types of capacity. So working with those CBO partners to build their capacity within their organizations to partner and deliver funds. And that is done, we're doing that on an individual basis, so not what we may think a CBO needs, but really working with those direct CBOs on what their needs are. Public safety and justice. We are, and there should be an R in that, we're strained. Sorry, Pat. We're strained by workload and general fund reductions. And I would also like to layer on here increased mandates from the state and also changes, public safety and justice reform measures have had an impact on our workload. And when we talk about mandates or we talk about reform, even if it is good or well-intentioned, if it is not, does not tie to a funding source, and it is passed down to counties, and others know this too, it just puts a greater strain. We are fortunate to have the local option levy similar to the library levy, which the voters for public safety voters approved in 2020, that has really helped with this capacity. I will say this is an area that as we look through the full system of public safety and justice, so that includes our sheriff's office, and part of that is our jail, district attorney, community corrections, and juvenile services. I've been incredibly impressed throughout this budget process how they've taken a one Washington County approach from a department leadership and really talked about what are some of the trade-offs from a system, because they're so interconnected, if a reduction is made in one area versus another. And with operations, we have to talk about capital too. We learned of significant critical facility needs this last year within our jail, community correction center, and Harkins House. These are needs that cannot wait to be addressed. The total is $48 million of critical needs. And what this has really called out is also the county's need, and under the board's leadership and direction, we are in the process of developing the county's first capital improvement plan, which will be a comprehensive plan tool to plan out for not only facilities, but also transportation and technology. Our facilities team is currently undergoing a facility condition index assessment to really look at all of our existing county facilities and determine what else do we need to urgently plan for. At the same time, we need to think long term, as we are a growing county. We have need for courthouse. We need to start discussing and look at feasibility of jail expansion. So it's taking care of what we have and also planning for the future at the same time. And then exciting, by the end of 2024, we will be opening the Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment, also known as CAT. And this is a behavioral health facility, and this will meet our many unmet needs of behavioral health within the county that we've been seeing for years. This project is really thankful. We're grateful and thankful for the opiate settlement, and also I want to extend appreciation to the cities that have transferred their opiate settlements to the county to make this also happen, and the good working relationship that we do have with your steady staff as we've been working through this planning process. And so this work is really just continuing to emerge, and we're looking forward to bringing the county's first capital improvement plan to the board later this summer for adoption. So let's talk about next steps in the budget process. So we are with you tonight, and we're meeting with you prior to even our budget committees. And so this is not the full in-depth budget committee presentation, as I know you're accustomed to hearing as well. We will have our first Washington County and Service District for Lighting Budget Committee meeting on May 8th. That is next Monday. And then the second meeting on May 11th. Due to just the wide array of changes and discussion we're anticipating within the general Washington County budget, we may schedule an additional budget committee meeting to ensure that the budget committee has ample time for discussion. On Monday, May 15th, will be the expanded Sheriff's Patrol District and Urban Rural Maintenance District. And then May 18th, May 31st, those will continue. And then we go to, on May 31st and June 1st, the budget committees will hold their public hearings. And actually, I want to go back to just the committee meetings. Under the board's leadership and direction, we have added public comment during each of those committee meetings to ensure that community has the opportunity not just to comment at the public hearing, but also to comment throughout the process. And then the board is scheduled to take action on June 20th. And this information is available on our website. So understanding the budget better. So we do have our proposed budget online. And actually, we do have 3 document sets that are actually listed. So it's not just the proposed budget, but you can get into further detail all the way down into the line item through those 3 document sets. So the purpose of this to ensure that we're open, transparent with the public dollars that are being spent through the county and for the budget committee's understanding and information needs. Public community, you can send questions, comments to the email address, which is highlighted on this page, finance_budget@washingtoncounty.gov. The questions that we receive, we will be collecting them into a shared document, including the answers, and we post those on our website so that community can have the value of seeing what individuals have asked. And this includes questions from the budget committee as well. And I mentioned the May 8th and 11th, and these, you can show up here. It'd be great to have you in the audience, but I know you'll be attending your own budget committee meetings, so they are available on YouTube as well. The budget, links to the budget are right on the home page of our website, and the web URL extension is listed on this page as well. So while we're working through this proposed budget process, there's a lot of information the budget committee and board has to absorb. Chair had mentioned that before and actually brought the budget books for illustration. And really, we do want to lean into the future at the same time. And so the future, as we lean into our vision of One Washington County, is looking to that strategic plan, continuing to move forward with you, with community, because the community needs us and needs us in different ways than they have maybe even yesterday or the day before. And so continuing to evolve into those needs and plan for those needs is really part of our focus as a staff team. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate your highlighting that. I'm just so proud of our leadership and our staff. And I know your time is really valuable, so I wrote up notes for myself to restrict my time. So thank you for bearing with me. So at most, we have another hour together, but I can't imagine you want to talk about the county budget for an hour. So I thought of the 13 of you who are here, and you're the reason why we're having this tonight. And there are 4 of you online as well, so if we could just allow them to use the raise hand feature now. How many of you have a question you'd like to discuss? Oh, not too many. Okay. Well, I'd be really happy if all 13 of you do. Don't worry. So I think it's very doable. Who would like to go first? I haven't seen any hands raised yet, and Brenda's over there to look for them. So you get to go first, if you'd like.
Thank you. So I have several questions, but I'll just ask a couple, and then we'll turn it over. I noticed one of the slides talked about cost-burdened households in Washington County. And so is the county in your budget, and you mentioned, Chair, the Clean Water Services budget also. Is Clean Water Services is the board looking at implementing a low-income rate for clean water services? And if so, how far along are we in that process? And just, I guess, a little bit of perspective or point of reference, because Hillsborough is looking at a low-income rate for our water. And so, where we bill clean water services and the water together, that to me seems a logical, partnership, for low-income rate for both utilities.
So with the ARPA funds, we did implement the low-income subsidy support. And it is a topic that the Clean Water Services Board is talking about. But if we implement that, then we have to turn around and cover that cost right to all the other ratepayers. And so there are a lot of downsides to us doing that. And so that's where we just touched on this recently at one of our board learning sessions, and our staff is coming back to us with a little bit more information.
Thank you. Then I have a question to start off with. The public safety levy was approved in 2020.
Yep.
And so will we, and it's a 5-year levy, will we be going back out again in 2024, a year early, just in case?
It expires, and the sheriff and I just verified this recently. It expires in June 30th of 2026. It's a 6-year levy, not a 5-year levy. So in 2024, we're planning on kicking off a new research project for the public safety levy for libraries as well. Yeah.
How's it going? My name is James Fage from North Plains. We have our own budget committee meeting going on right now, so they spun me off here to kind of pull a double duty. North Plains is a smaller community. There's not a lot of businesses there. Businesses are mom and pop shops mostly. It's mostly a bedroom community for that supplies the larger companies that are in Washington County. My neighbors are 2 doctors. They both work at Kaiser. I work at Intel, so is my wife. My neighbor works at Nike. And that's pretty, our city is pretty much like that. We have a police department that we fund through the county at a cost of over $120 an hour.
Yep, you get it.
That's very
contract
expensive.
service.
Oh, yeah, it's very expensive. And I was wondering, is there something we could do either, because we want to have some police officers at night, but $120 an hour is pretty steep. That's very expensive. Is there a way we could do it where we have a sliding scale? Because I know when we do one officer, we're paying for the infrastructure, everything. We get 2 of them, we're paying for everything again, plus the other officer. Or can we get a grant of some sort? Because
you can
the
always, as a city, apply for grants.
The larger cities have, the businesses that contribute. The houses can only go up 3% a year on the assessed value. And if you just look at your COLA costs, they ain't 3%. So that's a struggle we're having. We're having to have most of our budget go to police services. So what kind of grants are there out there? And if there isn't enough, if there's some small grants, or go talk to Pat or whatever, can we get in here something grant for some of these bedroom communities to actually afford the police officers that we like to have, and not just have to rely on like, oh, call the cops and eventually they'll show up or not. If it's a phase, if it's a active crime in progress, we'll send somebody over. If somebody broke in a car, maybe the next day, you know. Is there a way we could do that so we can actually have somebody closer to us in our community that knows us, you know, that knows our people?
James, this is very much a situation that is under the purview of the City Council of the City of Plains, North Plains. Okay? How you get your police services accommodated is up to your city council. The sheriff's department is merely a contracted service. We're not required to do it. But the sheriff's department and the board has been willing to offer Washington County Patrol services to you at cost coverage. You could find some other city police department or some private force to meet your needs. It is 100% your decision to make.
That being said, it's very expensive to do that. And
I think every mayor and city councilor here, as well as even THPRD for their safety department, can relate to the problem. It costs money.
right. So is there any room for like a grant for that to alleviate some of those costs?
Not from the county. I don't know that the state has any or the federal government has any. That's something your city manager would need to explore for you.
Thanks.
Don't you all think we share in the cost of services to our community members? And how do we balance that with our population mix of households, commercial, industrial? Yeah, it's a real challenge, very real challenge. Who's next? Valerie.
I have a number question, no surprise. When you were talking about what caused the general fund imbalance, you said that revenues are growing at 5.8%, or no, revenues, yeah, 5.8, and then 7.7 is your expenditures. So that's a 1.9% difference, but you're saying you're out of balance by 7.1. Is that different?
Microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. So your expenditures are growing at 7.7%. Your revenues are growing at 5.8%, which is a 1.9% difference, but you're saying you're out of balance by 7.1%. So I'm just wondering if that's a cumulative thing from prior years or where that comes from.
That is part of the gap. I think if you're trying to add those numbers up to get to the 25 million or to the 7%, those numbers don't. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a no. 5.8% is our, I'm going to call it our regular ongoing revenue. Think of it as property tax. So all of our revenue aside from the SIP. And so the SIP we're using to subsidize that difference between our expenses and our regular revenue. Yeah.
My other question, and I kind of know this, but so the levy money goes into the general fund, is that correct? And it's unrestricted? No.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I'm a little confused as to how, what money from the library and the MSTIP is being reduced.
This is why I spoke up earlier about WCCLS levy. So there are two levies that the voters have approved here in Washington County that are county-wide levy. WCCLS and the public safety levy. When there was this reference to MSTIP and WCCLS, it's the old WCCLS and the old MSTIP that have been rolled into our permanent rate, okay, due to Measure 547 and 50.
That explains it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And last, really quick, I want to thank you for putting in your proposed budget summary a statement about the difficulty of meeting unfunded mandates.
And speaking of unfunded mandates, so the first section is only like 35 pages, but it's got a lot of really incredible information. And under there's the CAO's message, the storytelling, and then there's a whole section on trends and initiatives. And in that trends and initiatives, I use search a lot in PDF documents. If you search for unfunded mandates, the whole first paragraph gave me information I had no idea about. How essentially counties were created under the state to serve as the local implementer of state services. But that changed starting in the 1950s. And so in a very small paragraph, it explains a lot of history about where we are today. And then combine that with continued state unfunded mandates, some that are for very good reasons, right? As well as with the impacts of measures 5, 47, and 50, we just have this difficult mix. Great question, thank you.
Just a couple quick ones. I appreciate the questions about the levy, but I also wanted to clarify the Washington County Library levy. Is that a 5-year? Because that's 2020 as well. So will that be going out in 24? And part of that's just for local knowledge too, as we ponder levies.
No, we went out a little early with it in 2020.
Perfect.
Which is why
it bumps out.
We have that longer time period.
Okay,
yeah.
That makes perfect. That makes sense. Thank you.
Did this math for myself and I re-verified it.
Oh, the early part makes total sense. So thank you.
Yeah,
for
which
that
is where
clarification.
2024 is really pivotal because if you wouldn't mind a brief story, when the three of us started on the county commission, it was, I think, the first time ever we've had three new members join the commission here in our county. And we had a lot to learn. And our staff, by the time summer was rolling around, we'd gotten through our first budget together in May and June, and wham, in July, they were like, okay, we got to get going on a levy replacement for public safety and a levy renewal for the library's levy. And so we were like, okay, let's dig in. And by June, we were moving by January, just July to January, 6 months later, we'd done polling to frame up. We'd done work with the departments on what was needed from DA, sheriff, juvenile, domestic violence, you name it, and all the libraries. And we started doing the legislation to refer it in January. Lightning speed. Well, there are a lot of constraints on that, and we need to do a more comprehensive job of looking out in time, and that's why it's going to be so pivotal for us to do likely a replacement levy for libraries. We've got a lot more work to do with diversity and whatnot, and we've really just got rock star libraries here in Washington County. Thank you. Everybody loves libraries. They're so valuable. And then public safety as well. I mean, I was astonished when we were talking about the replacement levy and needing to increase by 3 cents just to maintain services, but we went a little further because of growth needs and whatnot. Thank goodness we did. But what was great was it was approved by 65%, 66% of the voters. And we were sweating bullets like, oh, are they going to go for a 5% increase? So, but there are just tremendous demands on our public safety and justice system. So we really need your help in that 24-25 timeframe to take this holistic look because it's all interconnected.
Thank you, Chair, very much. And so to kind of go from there, really excited about the CAT in the center and that opportunity, such a tremendous need for all jurisdictions. So my question to that, as you describe the funds to kind of infrastructure, get the center set up, will that be then an added need in terms of operational expenditures as
Great
we go
question.
forward?
Yes, yes, and I wish I knew what page to give you the information on, but I haven't worked that far in the budget. Marnie might know. So our team has done an awesome job in raising the capital funds. The operation funds, they're feeling pretty good about that. Like that's covered through our healthcare arrangements, as well as ongoing funding secured. So we just have, and they've done tremendous work going after grants. There have been multiple opioid settlements. Ms. Angie mentioned your cities as well. So we just have this final gap that we've gone to the state legislature to ask for help. We've gone to the federal government to ask for help. So we've secured the 2 buildings. So it's really just trying to get the final funding across the finish line and open one of them up the latter part of 2024 and the other early in 2025. Marnie, is there something more you want to share? We'll get a mic for those of you who are on Zoom, and feel free to raise your hand so that Brenda can jingle us that you're out on Zoom.
No, thank you for the question, and you did a great job answering it. The operational costs should be covered through Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, and grants and contracts. It's our intent to not add to the general fund need. So, thank you.
Of which tab?
Of the operating budget.
Up under operating budget, page 25 and 26. Yep.
Hi.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for doing this, by the way, and especially for doing it after work hours. I greatly appreciate that very, very much. My question is from slide 25 about examples of other key services. Looking at the community development piece, and I fully acknowledge that I'm bringing like all the other hats I wear, whether that's fair or not. It is what it is. I can't really separate them. And I serve on the Supportive Housing Services Bond Oversight Committee with Chair Harrington. One of the things that we've heard in that work, in my work in philanthropy, is so many grantees who are doing the work that counties, cities can't do because we don't have the language skills, the cultural skills, the community trust. These organizations are doing work that we all depend upon, but they're getting a lot of, there's a lot of administrative burden with what's being often asked by government partners around reporting, and application processes. So part of me started to get kind of paranoid when I heard like these vacancies weren't going to be filled, because I wondered, like, does that connect with some of the struggles that they're having with having like the technical assistance? Okay, I see no's. That's great. And then so this 5.2 million for shelter.
Let me
Yeah.
explain why.
Okay.
So the SHS funding is part of that restricted funding, right? So the Metro voters imposed certain restrictions, and then the Metro Council and the Oversight Committee have said you have to report this way. And so the program is still somewhat new, as you and I know, right? So our team is now working with the first set of providers really to assess, okay, how is it going? How can we make things more efficient? Case in point, I just learned today that we've had some struggles on our side with capacity to get the revenues out the door, to reimburse the providers for the work they've been doing. We own that. We're on it now, getting.
Are any of those vacancies?
No. So the vacancies that Ms. Angie talked about were general fund funded vacancies, and SHS is restricted fund funded. So it's whole and growing, which is why here we are, we're talking about general fund having reductions, yet FTE continues to grow. Just case in point. Well, that's happening because we have so many of these special programs that are funded through these restricted or special funds. SHS is an easy example. Other grants from the state where the grant or whatever requires us to hire new staff that is paid for by these restricted funds.
Does the county or metro require you to do that grant making on a reimbursement basis? Or like, is that something that you're being told to do? The reason
I don't know. That's a little more than
It's a very
I can
detailed
answer
question,
tonight.
I'm in the weeds, sorry.
No, it's really a question Marnie and her shop can answer.
I will ping
that.
Marnie.
I have a question about the SIP. So where do SIP funds go if they were like when they're not being used to fund a gap? So it looks like the county's used SIP funding for a few fiscal years now, and you mentioned that you're going to reduce the total that is used in the coming year's budget. But like, what would you use those funds for otherwise? And like into the future, knowing like I'm assuming that the goal is to completely reduce this gap over time so it doesn't continue to grow. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious about SIP funds. They're kind of new to me, but also curious, like, what would you do with those funds? Because it sounds like right now they're kind of backfilling general fund.
So historically, we've used them for one-time expenditures. We've used them to subsidize, to supplement the general fund. One of the items that we'll be bringing to the board over the next few months is to create a SIP policy. And it's to answer that question that you're asking is how do we use our SIP funds into the future? How much of it do we set aside for one time only? How much do we use for ongoing expenditures? So that'll be an opportunity for the...
So you have in the city of Beaverton, economic development zones, right? Where you get a community service fee in lieu of property tax assessments for a short period of time. That's what an SIP is. It's a longer period of time, way bigger price tag. So this is in lieu of the property tax assessments. And so I just wasn't sure if you were familiar with that part of it. That's all.
I'm just going to directly answer that question. Over time, we have used the SIP reserves to balance. We don't have the SIP reserves to do that anymore. So that is the importance of creating a SIP policy. We also will be having expiring SIP agreements. Now, those properties will come onto the tax rolls, but we need to really get clear on our financial policies, what we're using one-time funds for, and what we're using ongoing funds for, so that we do course correct this, because we don't have those reserves to rely on, as was illustrated in that chart that went back to 2017. And part of this is the challenge with the constraint property tax system, the increasing in needs, mandates, and how do we balance this service delivery portfolio to the community.
Yeah, thank you. I think, well, we're dealing with similar things in our city. We're having similar conversations, and it's really hard because we are talking about services that our communities depend on and rely on and expect from us, because I think our area prides ourselves on high levels of service. But so I was just kind of curious how you're handling it with the SIP, but then I was also curious, I think based on your pie chart, you still have a healthy contingency in your budget. I was curious if, like, is your general fund, like, cash reserve balance healthy?
Short answer is yes. So the contingency that's built into our FY24 budget meets our policy. I'll just say that. So
Thank you.
General fund, yeah.
Again, I want to thank you for having this session tonight. I think it's very important and a good idea, so I appreciate that. Yeah. So I have a couple questions. The first is in regard to the mental health response teams and that with the sheriff. And I'm not sure if they're a dual funded operation unit where some of it's mental health and some of it's law enforcement. But I just want to get a clarification that the funding for that concepts will go forward complete, you know.
Yes, yes, it will. We are continuing that same service level, and yes, it is mental health response and paired with deputies. And I do want to just commend Sheriff Garrett's leadership also on increasing training, that training amongst deputies within the department.
So I appreciate that because it is something that our city certainly thinks is very important, and we've been the beneficiaries of some of that service. The other area I have is not so much a question, but it has to do with affordable housing. If I understand correctly, the current model or paradigm for affordable housing projects is 30 units or more. And given the available land in the smaller communities, Forest Grove just being one of them, 30 units, finding property for 30 units and finding developers is a challenge. If we could come up with a paradigm that would allow fewer units done by smaller developers, then we can start chipping away at the affordable housing needs as an infill to existing properties rather than the difficulties we're having with the urban boundary.
Thank you for sharing that comment. As you may know, we're nearing the end of the Affordable Housing Bond Program. Not the construction, but the project approval for committing those funds out. We just approved our small second round. That program in Washington County is spoken for. So I'm starting to hear some conversations about, okay, well, the need hasn't gone away. Well, we didn't say it would. We said we would focus on the harder aspects that the federal affordable housing funding to date hadn't addressed, right? The extremely low income, as well as the larger units for families. And so we added to that having a mix. So there were 3 main parameters that we designed that program for and designed it together. I was a Metro councilor at the time, but it's been really cool to be on the other side of that. So, everybody's dealing with the effects of sensitivity on property tax bills and incomes and inflation. So I'm only starting to hear recognition that, ooh, we need more of this. That's been really good, but I haven't heard anybody saying, okay, what's the program? How do we scope this out? So that is a really great bit of information you shared. I think it applies to a lot of our smaller cities. And so if you wouldn't mind sending that email together and sharing that with the members of the Metro Council, I've certainly made note of it, and my colleagues have heard note of it, plus staff, of course. But I'm really glad you shared that. Thank you. Who's next? Anybody out on Zoom land have any questions? Oh, go ahead. Nope, there's nobody there. Brenda's been watching it for us.
Okay, thank
Do
you.
you all know Brenda Bartlett? She's policy assistant for Commissioner Nafisa and all kinds of special projects for Ms. Angie. Oh, and Megan is there. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. Megan McKibben is the policy assistant for Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Treese, and Daniel Nava is over there as well. She likes Pam the best.
So, Mike, first of all, I will echo the comments of appreciation for doing this. This is very, very helpful. And I love the graph, Ms. Angie, that, that with the population growth and the permanent rate and all of that. Great graph. So I was wondering, going forward with library funding, and not from the WCCLS levy, but just out of the general fund, I know, and it's been referred to as with the 4, 7, and 10% cuts, knowing that it wasn't necessarily a hard 4, 7, or 10. There was, flexibility within that. So is the library budget being cut, or is it being flat funded, which then does create a gap for cities because it's not keeping up with inflation, if that makes sense? And so I guess the bottom line question is, what kind of gap will cities need to fund for libraries to keep the service whole?
So that's a great question. I want to draw a distinction.
Please.
Before I answer this question, because we do have the levy and property tax. So my response is to the property tax, not the library levy. The library levy was voter approved, that stays intact. So what we're talking about is the property tax contribution from the general fund to the library system. So I would actually ask Lisa Tattersall. She has been working with your library directors, her and Rachel Fuller, with your city managers, and she can provide the easiest short answer to this question.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Hi. We took a 7% reduction on the general fund transfer from the county, but we really prioritize library funding allocations. That's the largest part of our expenditures, and those will increase by 1% in the coming fiscal year. In our current IGAs with the cities and nonprofits for library service, we had originally planned for a 3% increase. So that is a reduction, but it is still an increase. And we took other reductions on the WCCLS side internally. How that impacts every city and every nonprofit is going to be different, frankly, because you all it's a blended funding model. And so depending on the inputs on the local side and how libraries are spending their money locally, so I can't speak to that part, but I can say every library is getting a 1% increase from what they got last year. Okay, thank you.
And Lisa's been meeting directly with your library directors, as well as we've been meeting with the city managers having this discussion, so they are aware of this. So if you bring this question back to them, it shouldn't come as a surprise.
Fines for late books to make up that gap. Yeah. Well, yeah, for Callaway. Yeah. So, and then the other question, it has to do with MSTIP. And so, being involved with WCCC, JPAC, and all of that, the transportation, funding is important. And so, is MSTIP being touched at all? Are we borrowing against it, to pay back later? I know that it's now in the general fund, and part of that, I think 96 cents, which you mentioned, which again was, yes,
Right.
Correct. And but anyway, talk about MSTIP. Thanks.
Yeah, so MSTEP, that transfer is cut by 7% as well. So in essence, that does, reduce that capacity of capital projects. The approach for this year is really a balanced approach that I and my leadership team took in the proposed budget to really look across county services. Earlier this year, I received correspondence from your police chiefs with concerns on our jail capacity, staffing level. Upon response or receipt of that letter, Sheriff Garrett and I quickly organized a meeting with your city managers and police chiefs to talk about it. And really what came up through that conversation was the reality, which we know, but sometimes it faces us, that we're interconnected. And at that time, I shared, I hear you in concerns on the jail public safety. I hear you concerns on libraries. I hear you concerns on transportation funding, behavioral health funding, and the list goes on and on. And so the approach this year with the budget is looking at our whole system of service across Washington County and balancing that. This proposed budget does have service impacts to library, to transportation, public safety, et cetera.
You'll also want to take a look under the capital budget, pages 262 and 263, because you'll see that we're still struggling to get things constructed out from the MISTIP 3C program. So as we've all been discussing a 23-28 program, really, which what we would have called a 3F, we're still implementing, constructing 3C, 3D, high growth is separate, as well as 3E. So we have a longer schedule of build out, longer than 5 years. So lot to discuss.
And cost escalation is significantly impacting transportation. And just when we thought it was leveling out a bit, Stephen Roberts had broke that hope with me that we are still seeing those costs increase as we're going out for bids.
And I just want to add, speaking as just one commissioner, that we have a lot of work that we still need to go through in our discussions that we haven't been able to get to have a healthier county government. Discussions that are just now being informed by that discovery opportunity that I spoke about. And we haven't been able to engage with our staff on the whatabouts and what ifs and what might we possibly do, because they've been so heads down these last 5-6 months just to develop this proposed budget. They're pretty tired. But our revenue picture is still somewhat in flux because we know our state legislature is still doing work. So we're sort of waiting on bated breath till the state revenue forecast comes out. Is it May 15th or so? 17th, thank you. So newsflash, this year, I, for one, am being so bold as to contemplate, emphasis the word contemplate, what pausing our historical general fund subsidy for MISTIP might offer for the other countywide services that have been starved as a result of the lack of planning and management. Greg mentioned that our ERP system, which is HR, finance, and some other things, 23 years old. We are generations behind. And that's not the only system, right? The reason why we have this critical facilities crisis, we don't have a capital improvement plan that I know all of you have in your city governments. It's unheard of. It's frankly embarrassing. And we have the responsibility on our watch to do that heavy lift. And so we're going to have some conversations as our budget committees on what ideas might follow contemplation of different problems that exist. And then out of those ideas, what, if any, might we want to try? And that would translate into amendments. So I'm still way over here myself reading the budget and going, ooh, okay, and weighing, and how brave do I want to be in furthering some ideas to contemplate some different solution sets. So we'll see. It's going to be an exciting few weeks.
Chair Harrington, Mayor Bubenik has a question online.
Hello, Mayor Bubenek. The
Good
floor is
evening.
yours.
Just following up, so the 7% cut to misstep, is that for the upcoming cycle or across all phases? Because we never settled in on the projects on the new cycle that's coming. So just clarify whether 7% cut is, please.
It's definitely not for the new set, okay? But your detailed question is one that we'll have to follow up.
Okay, because it's just, yeah, it's like you're saying, Chair Harrington, you've got projects in the queue specifically here in Tualatin, and for sure we're at Tualatin Shoreward Road that, are from phases way
Yeah, it was in
before me,
Misstep
where
3C, for
yeah,
example.
Lou Ogden was mayor and lobbying
$9,000,000
this, so
$652,500.
yep. So just interested on, what kind of cuts we're going to do. If that 7% is like you're saying is for existing phases, and then what we're going to have to do to regroup on the set of projects for the new phase.
We're noting the question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for asking. Are there any
Sure.
other questions out there in Zoom land?
None at this time, Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Brenda.
So I'm just going to echo what Frank said. And again, it's the current misstep projects. What kind of impact are there going to be? And if there is, then we need to get word as fast as possible.
Well, luckily, it's not as bad as us still. I've been sitting on eggshells since the last week of September, knowing that with the severity of the jail HVAC system, we might have to close the jail down with like 24-hour notice. Where in the world are we going to find a place to put 700 adults in custody? It's not like we can just turn around and put them in hotels. We learned as a state what happens when during wildfire smoke, prisoners, right, from the prisons, even higher security, even more restrictive conditions have to be moved around. It's not pretty. So that's why I feel very, I wouldn't say comfortable about contemplating this stuff, but I feel that it is my responsibility to go through these thought exercises. Because there's a reason why the ERP system hasn't been even thought about.
And I think that all of us as elected officials, we know we have our term. We know, and what we all want to do is leave whatever responsibility we have in better shape than it came to us, and to address the problems. And that's really what this budget is about. It's like it's trying to turn the ship around a bit on some pretty significant philosophies around being a low-cost county versus making sure that we are a county that addresses what our issues are. So, soapbox.
Commissioner Rogers, go right ahead.
Thank you, and thank
You
you
don't
for
get to
everything.
ask questions, though. You only get to contribute to the conversation.
Oh, I can't contribute to the conversation?
No, that's what we definitely want you to do.
Oh, okay, all right. First of all, thank you for attending, everyone. I apologize, I can't be there in person tonight. My wife is having a little bout with kidney stones, and I feel I need to be a little close to home. Some of the things that we're discussing tonight have not been discussed at any budget level at the county, as you heard previously. And there are some major issues that I don't know that are going to come up tonight, but I think if I were in a city again and I started my career there, I'd be curious about. One of them has been brought up as a misstep. The only reason misstep is a part of the general fund is many years ago, I got a call from Tom Bryan, who then subsequently became our chair, but he was in the state legislature, and he called and said, "Roy, would you like misstep not to have to be voted on every 3 to 5 years? Would you like it to come through Measure 50 because he was ahead of revenue? Would that be a good alternative?" And I said, yes, we're tired of going back and spending the money at the ballot box. So that's how misstep became a part of the permanent levy. It was never envisioned that it would ever not be used for roads in totality. by any board that I've served on. So we all can have respectful disagreements, but I too am very concerned that anything would be changed in our commitment to our partners, because that was the only way that MISTIP got approved, was through a definite partnership with the city. So that's a MISTIP issue. One of the things that Catherine and I have been in total agreement on and working, I think, with the rest of the board, and I think they're there too, is that we really have always said that cities are the best servicer of many of the things that are provided to our citizens. I'm excluding parks. I'm not going there. I'm just saying the things that we think of common city services. We're not for, pardon me, for forced annexation, but one of the interests you might have for the future is that we've never really costed our services out to those unincorporated areas. And that's an interesting study that we're going to embark upon, and it needs to be done because frankly, cities shouldn't be subsidizing unincorporated areas, nor unincorporated areas subsidizing cities. So we need to know that answer. We've always just said, should we go through an annexation effort? And that's not been really what anybody wanted to do. We wanted to have a position of taking and looking at what are those costs. So the chair and I have been advocates for that. And I think that's something the city should be very interested in. Another one that I'm interested in and nobody's brought up is we tried it before, and I know we've had major comments about it. I happen to live where I'm talking to you from right now at Bull Mountain, which is in Tigard. We have areas outside of Tualatin, which Frank can attest to when I was mayor down there, that we're running cars from Hillsborough to southern part of our county. And is there some amount of I guess, franchising, if you want to call it that, is a poor term for it, but we could at least talk with our city partners about services that we may purchase from you. And that dialogue needs to happen because there's a lot of things that are pretty silly that we're replicating. And I've found that to be problematic. And I don't think our board is too concerned about that as well. So I would encourage our city partners and our special service districts. There's a place for everybody, but I think we need to have a dialogue about what the county does, because we're a very big part of what you do. But frankly, we're a competitor in certain areas, and we don't need to be. And we can talk about how we're maybe shouldn't be. And I think that's the dialogue that needs to start happening. So I'll stop with that, but I wanted to get those comments in.
Anybody else have another question? Don't want to belabor the point, that's for sure. I really appreciate those of you who have mentioned that this was useful. Thank you very much. We took a risk, didn't want to bore you to death, but we also wanted to give you a flavor for the situation we're finding ourselves in, the great work that staff has put in to give us a proposed budget, and how we're trying to follow through and act on adopting a budget for this fiscal year and on into the future. So I know our conversation and serving our communities will continue. Please know that you can share more questions with us. The slides had that email address that I'm not going to remember right, finance_budget@washingtoncountyor.gov. That's finance_budget. So, and of course, if you have any feedback about what could have made tonight better, like I really wish the timing wasn't so constrained with your budget work as well, because my preference would have been for us to go through those department budgets this next week and then convene together so you have the situation. But we would also, we at least, the commissioners, we haven't even had 2 weeks with the budget, right? It's 6 days old. Yay! It's a 6-day-old baby. Yeah, yes, yeah. You want to say something?
You know, in the future, I'd also like to see this interchange be, what are your constraints? What are you facing? Where are your pains? So that we're learning as well. So maybe that's something that we can work on in the future.
So as you're going through your budget process this year, maybe write a note to yourself, you know? So next year, when we start talking with the board about the county budget, you'll have your list already made. You know, you can theorize ahead of time if you continue to have similar sorts of things or if it's going to be a variation on a theme. But yeah, it would be really useful to know. So thank you, Commissioner Rogers, for commenting earlier and sharing your thoughts with the whole group. Thank you for those of you who are on Zoom. And I really want to, once again, would you like to say anything, Commissioner Willie? Thanking them or anything for coming?
Yeah, it's been an hour and 46 minutes. I haven't said a word. So, I think that could be a new record. No, as I was listening to your comments, Chair, this has been really good, but I think the ending message is that this is not over June 30th when we adopt this budget. We go into another siege, meaning your date of July 1. We're going to need to continue to have these conversations with all of our municipalities and partners in Washington County into next year, because we'd love to say this is all there is. We've accomplished the task. We're done, and that everything looks good. It does not, and we know that. And so the demand for these services is continuing, and the funds are continuing to lag behind. And so we're going to need to have this conversation going into the fall and certainly next winter on how best do we do this. So thank you for being here.
And I feel really blessed to have the colleagues that I do to do that problem solving and to have these conversations with. So I think that says something, that we're all very comfortable working with one another and really want to make sure that we make the most of the years ahead of us. So thank you again. Drive safely home. I hope your budget seasons go smoothly as well. It's really tremendous work that you do in service to our communities. Thank you again for coming tonight.